line up to go and get my vaccine at one stage because I was just so worried about job opportunities and being able to feed myself and my family. But my body actually, it had a reaction. I just felt like being sick. I was shaking. And so I just couldn't do it. So I think even if I wanted to, my body just wasn't accepting the birds and bees don't wonder and they aren't fearful of where their next meal is going to come from, but God feeds them anyway. I was researching the other day about red light and how it increases fertility and all of these things. And I came across a really recent, beautiful journal article and I got to the end of it and it was concluding that red light was really good for fertility and conception rates. And I looked at who funded it and it was an IVF clinic that wanted to swap out all the blue lights during the conception for red lights because it increased fertility outcomes so they could increase their service charges.
So let's dive straight in. We have Kiera Lee, who is a quantum clinician, and I'm going to leave it to you to explain what that is to us, because that's going to be a new job role, a new role in the kind of health space that many people wouldn't have heard of. So what is a quantum clinician?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I mean, I'm trying to work it out myself. I feel like we're forefronters in this industry, and so we kind of get to create it, which is pretty cool. But basically, the term that we've all coined is quantum clinician. And so, what on earth is a quantum clinician? We're somebody that looks at the body from the quantum scale. So we believe that fundamentally, below biochemistry, we actually have a more fundamental level to life and our being, not only for us, but all life on the planet. And we believe that that level is on the scale of electricity. And so we really look at the body from a perspective of not molecules or vitamin D or vitamin D. We're really looking at protons, neutrons, and electrons and how the energy transfer happens from our body. Unlike traditional Western or allopathic medicine, we really believe that we're not closed thermodynamically, which means that what we put into our body in terms of food isn't the only thing that affects us. It's actually our entire environment. So the ground that we walk on, the air we breathe, these are synergistic with us and they're no way separate from us. So I guess what differentiates us is that we really look at the body in the context of its environment as no way separate from, if that makes sense. I mean, we can get into any of those areas if you'd like.
Yeah, I love it. I love it. So in summary, we've evolved within a system, and how can we return to that system and become coherent with the system in which we evolved to kind of express optimally and be our optimal selves? Did I get that right?
Exactly. I mean, to really break it down into just really simple terms, we are not separate to our environment. We're completely connected to. And so to think the ground that we've evolved to walk on, like if you believe in God, then you believe that the earth around us was perfectly designed to suit us. And I'm a Christian faith, so I really believe that God created the sun not to hurt us, but to heal us, and it's in no way separate from us. And the ground that we walk on is healing, and the air that we breathe is healing. And perhaps maybe now that us silly people have invented houses and artificial lights and all of these things, maybe that's actually what's making us sick, and that it's not the sun and it's not the ground and it's not the natural air and it's not nature. It really is all the modern things that we've created in life. And so I guess my industry, we're really looking at things like technology, things like the disconnection from our natural environment and how that's really impacting our health. And we really think that that really is what's causing the bedrock of chronic illness. I mean, if we look back to when the artificial light was really first created, that's really when we start to see breast cancer pop up. There's no actually Western records of breast cancer until the 1900s. And so we really have to ask ourselves, okay, what changed? Is it really genetics or is it epigenetics? And is it something in our environment that's pulling that trigger to make us sick? Because it doesn't really make sense that us as people, we have all of these genetic conditions that our ancestors never had. And so we have to start asking the question as to how that makes sense.
Yeah. Okay, this is amazing. So, just introducing the show, this is called Tales of Transformation. And the intention here is that I'm speaking to people who I find really inspiring, who are doing things differently, who are thinking outside of the mainstream, who are considering their actions and the way it impacts their bodies and their ability to express and be and live a fruitful, thriving life and live with a heart wide open and to live with sovereignty and agency and to question the way we've been taught things are right and policy and etc. To actually create an earth where we love each other and we live in coherence with our environment. So that's just exactly what we need. Everything you just said.
What a
So
beautiful podcast. That's amazing.
yeah. Thank you.
I'm very honored. Thank you. It's not easy running a podcast. So I really appreciate you putting this together and doing what you do.
Oh, thank you so much. Thank
You're
you
very
so
welcome.
um So I've listened to clips of things that you've said here and there. I've just tried to kind of get a vibe and a feel. So what I understand is the transition kind of and the active decision to move away from mainstream allopathic nursing, which is what you were studying, came during the pandemic. And you made the decision that the mandates and the rules that they were placing on students was just not something you were willing to subscribe to. And so I think that was a blessing because it enabled you to really take this path. But what do you think is the difference between someone who didn't want to comply but did, and someone who didn't want to comply and didn't? Where do you think that comes from?
That's a really good question. So is the difference between someone who didn't want to comply but they did, and someone
Yeah.
who didn't want to comply and then they chose not to?
Yeah, because that
That's
it's fear, right? It's the response to fear. And I'm
Mhm.
going to lose my job and I'm going to lose my opportunities and I blah, 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 right? Where do you think
Mhm.
that courage comes from to say, I can't subscribe to this and I'm going to stick by what I believe in?
Mhm. Yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot of things that determine our mentality and the choices that we make in life. I can only really speak on my own experience.
Yeah.
And I think that because, and I mean, this resonates as well with my other friends in nursing school who chose not to comply. There was only a few, but there was probably five of us. And I think something we all had in common was that we grew up in small towns and we were very connected to the earth growing up. So
Mm.
I'm from a farming family, so I was always outside. I had this connection to nature. I had this, I guess, sovereignty. I knew where my food came from as a child. And my parents just, without even really knowing, just the way that they were, instilled really strong values of sovereignty into me. And I also didn't like being told what to do.
Um,
So I think that also played a role.
yeah.
Um, but it's a sense of intuition. I think that most people are so disconnected from their intuition. And now I know it's because when you're unhealthy, and when you're really stressed out and when you're really focused on inhumane things, I think your intuition takes a bit of a beating and it kind of goes away for a little bit because if you're not even healthy in the most physical sense in terms of you're in fight or flight mode and you're so focused on the present, why would your body put energy, spare energy into your intuition? It just wouldn't. It's so focused on the present. And I think that because I mean, I wasn't well, but I still was quite intuitive at this stage of my life. I think from my upbringing and being quite healthy previously, that I just could feel it in my body. And if anyone asked me what it was really the feeling in my body. I just knew that something was wrong. And I had no reason to question the medical industry. I was as centralized as they come. I loved pharmaceuticals and I thought they were amazing. And I thought I knew everything about health when I was in nursing school.
Yeah.
Now I think that most things that I learned were a lie.
Mm.
But anyway, another story for another day. And so yeah, it was just really this gut feeling of intuition that something was wrong. And I actually remember being so upset because I was just so excited to graduate and have that full-time job. And I really resonated with my scrubs and saying that I was a nurse and I was the first person in my family to go to university. And that whole hierarchy that we're taught as children, a success is growing up, getting a degree, having good grades, getting a car, getting a good job, having a husband and kids and a house and all these things. But that's not really life. And if happiness comes from something that you're given, it can be easily taken away from you. And so you have to have that, I guess, curiosity for what else is out there, if not the reality that's been laid out for us. And so yeah, I mean, I did actually line up to go and get my vaccine at one stage because I was just so worried about job opportunities and being able to feed myself and my family. But my body actually, it had a reaction. I just felt like being sick. I was shaking. And so I just couldn't do it. So I think even if I wanted to, my body just wasn't accepting the vaccine. And so I thank my body for that.
Yeah, yeah. It's funny because that's my thought process too, is, that if you are disconnected from your essence, then everything external is going to have an influence on the way you express, your clarity of thought, your ability to question things and to stand by the truth. And that's not a criticism, that's just a product of the world that we live in. And so, yeah, thank you for sharing that. And that's really interesting how, like, even if your mind and your logic and your fear was like, okay, let's go take this, your body and your wisdom was like, this isn't the path for you. And that's God. Like, that's God
I was
speaking.
about to say that it really comes back to having a faith in God and not fearing. I mean, I love the scripture that talks about birds and bees don't wonder and they aren't fearful of where their next meal is going to come from, but God feeds them anyway. And I mean, that's the faith that I had to take and know. I had to know that it wasn't okay to make decisions out of fear. If I had accepted that vaccine, then I would have been making a decision out of fear.
Yeah.
And we don't need to fear. And then I think that when you step into the unknown and every bone in your body is telling you there's no rational explanation that makes sense here. And I don't have any idea where my next paycheck is going to come from, what my career has in store for me, if I'm going to be homeless, if I'm going to be, ridiculed or ostracized by my community. But I know that I have faith, and I know that if God's planted this seed in my heart, then He's going to make sure that everything's okay and better than it possibly could be. And when you take that step of faith, I think that everything kind of works out for you. And thankfully it did for me.
Yeah.
God bless. Because I've been there and it's extremely hard.
It's hard, but you put your faith in the thing that brought you here, and that will carry you through. I would love to start by talking about water and the role of water in health, because there's so many of us who now know, like, let's not drink tap water. Absolutely not. Like, but there are so many different options for healthy water. And I know this is a struggle for me. I've seen all the Kangen water people really promoting that and saying that that is a thing that's turned their health around. And I believe that that's been their experience. And then the reverse osmosis, the distilled water, the structured water, ideally we know we would be getting it straight from the spring, and that would be our ideal. Can you talk through water and what the best options are for people who live in cities and maybe don't have access to that?
Yeah, of course. I mean, I think that it's important to note that everything in life, every supplement, every food can be good and bad, but there's a negatives versus benefits ratio. And so I think you have to be aware of that. So there's negatives to drinking plastic bottled spring water, but there's also positives to drinking plastic bottled spring water as opposed to eating or drinking tap water, if that makes sense. So I think the most interesting thing that I learned in university was that, yes, I did learn some good things in university. It wasn't all horrible. Was we actually make water inside of us, irrespective to the water that we actually are drinking.
Yes.
And so you could be drinking 2 liters of water a day, but doesn't mean you're actually hydrated. It doesn't mean it's getting into the cell. And so knowing that our mitochondria actually came from the ocean, I think that sea minerals are really, really important. So things like quinton minerals, sea minerals, Celtic salt is really important for getting that water to the places where it needs to be. And then actually to support the mitochondria to make its own water, which is really cool. And so, yes, tap water, horrible. Fluoride, I think.
Yeah.
I read a study today that said that fluoride takes 20 years to be taken out of the bone and out of the body.
Oh, gosh.
Which is horrible, because in my industry, we know fluoride to be a dielectric blocker, which means that it literally minimizes the electricity in your body, which is not good. And to think that some children grew up on that and now they're going to spend the next 20 years detoxing, that is sad. So if you're a parent listening to this, probably get a filter if you're drinking tap water to get rid of the fluoride and also the chlorine, because that's going to cause issues with your microbiome, with your gut health, and completely ruin the flora in there, right? We think bacteria are bad. They're actually something that can help us, and they're inside of us doing good things. So yes, big no to tap water. out of the picture. I think that spring water is the best option, whether you have access to that from a natural spring like I do, it gets delivered here, or you can have spring water from a bottle in the store. I think that there's some articles online that show that the water, the plastic water, the spring water that has the least amount of microplastics in it is the Evian, EVAN water.
Okay, yeah.
You can usually get that globally, but that by far has the least amount of microplastics in it. And then I also really like the Voss water too, because obviously it's in glass. So spring water in glass is the best. If you have to get plastic, Evian's the best one. And then you want to remineralize that. So popping some minerals back in there, because when we're stressed, which we all are, we're always going to burn through minerals. So I think that adding minerals to any water that you drink is good. And then you actually want to support the water that you're making inside of yourself. So we can drink water all day and that's fine, especially when it's really hot out and all these things. But we really want to be supporting our intracellular water, because that's what's going to hydrate us internally. That's what's going to help us have really healthy bowel motions, have nice plump skin, be wrinkle-free when we're 80 years old, hopefully. Pray to God about that. And how we do that is all the quantum and circadian healthcare stuff that all of us people like Jalal and I, we don't shut up about. And that's like seeing natural sunlight, being connected to the ground, having proper mineral status, watching the sunrise, all those things, specifically red light, which we're so devoid on in our life, is really, really important for helping that mitochondria make water. It actually tells the mitochondria to make water, which is important. So in terms of water, yes, I could talk all day about water sources and which one's the healthiest, but I think that we're kind of super fascinated over the wrong things. We really should be supporting our body to make water. And when you do that, you can actually drink less water. But then I think you were asking questions surrounding things like Kangen, things like the Amalema wand. I think all of these new devices that have come out since everyone started caring about water. Yeah. I think it's so interesting. There's really great studies from the Amalema wand that's shown that the crystallized really, it's got, the water in the Amalema wand, it's really pure. It's been blessed. It has no phthalates in it or anything like this. And so the whole notion is that when you actually use that Amalema wand on your natural water that's come from a tap or that's come from a spring, it's supposed to really purify that water. And the studies say that it does. So, I mean, I'm not against it. Do I think that if you're someone who doesn't have spare funds, do you need to go buy an Amalema wand? Absolutely not. But if you do and you want to get it, I don't see any harm in it. The Kangen water is really interesting because one of my friends was a sales rep for it, but she's not anymore. And I actually had a client who was doing everything right with her health, but she had severe gut issues. And she actually lived in the UK, funnily enough. And she didn't know what she was doing. And so I had a consultation with her and she stopped using her Kangen and her stomach issues went away. Now, it's important to note that with Kangen, I'm not here to, say that something works or it doesn't. But something that's really interesting is that all the studies that have been done for Kangen were done in Japan.
Yes.
And Japanese, they're very, very rich in something called DHA, which helps us kind of utilize. It makes our cells fit a different mold. And so something that will work on people from Japan might not necessarily work on someone from Australia or somebody from Europe. And so, it's electrolyzing the water and it's essentially zapping with electricity. And so I think that the vibration that's put into the water, personally, I don't think it's very natural. Do I think that it could have an antioxidant effect? Yeah, I think so. Do I think that it can actually be inflammatory? I also think so, depending on that person and their environment and their cellular health. It's just up to you to find what works, I guess.
Okay, that's a really great answer because it allows space for people to understand that what works in their body may not work in somebody else's body. And also perhaps many of us don't have access to the perfect water that we should be drinking. And so it's saying, okay, well, if you have the funds, maybe you can do a little bit of everything and see what works, etc. So I love how there's space in that answer and also not like putting something in the X box of no, apart from tap water, which is a big no.
Exactly. And I think that at the end of the day, if you have to purchase just a very inexpensive under-the-counter filter to get rid of the fluoride, I think that's good enough. Then you just want to remineralize the water. But yeah, the Kangen's interesting. I did talked to somebody the other day who was telling me that they tried to recreate the studies in America, but they didn't work, so they never got published. So that's just another interesting fact.
Interesting. Yeah, that is an interesting fact.
I only know what I know, so there could be some
Absolutely.
other data out there or something. I'm not too sure.
Yeah, yeah. And it is about looking at things with curiosity and not drawing conclusions too quickly, and just having that intention to move closer and closer to optimal health in a way that isn't stressful. Because I always say stress is a toxin. Like, don't stress out about it. Just make that small shift first, see how it lands, and then increase your capacity for taking on new things, because stress is just not good. Not good. We have enough of it
Exactly.
already. Yeah.
Yeah, some people stress about their health so much they give themselves health concerns.
Yeah. Tell us more about the role of mitochondria in women and fertility, pregnancy, motherhood, because I think it was Dr. Jalal that told me that the female egg is the place that is most densely populated with mitochondria, and therefore that must have an impact on fertility and the offspring that we're producing. So I'm sure you're going to have a lot more to say on this.
Yeah, this is my favorite topic to nerd out about. So if you need me to be quiet or to ask a question, just let me know. But yeah, Jalal's completely right in saying that the mitochondria are so abundant in female ovum, and it's for a good reason, because the mitochondria, they are what produce energy and electricity for our body. And so the places that need the most electricity and the most energy, like the heart, the brain, the female reproductive system, they're the places that are going to have the most mitochondria, which is very interesting. And so when we look at chronic disease in the world today, I think it can all be tied back to mitochondria, including infertility to a degree. Leptin's also a big issue, and we can get into that. And we look at the chronic disease rates, and it's, Alzheimer's, dementia, it's cardiac issues, it's all these places that are so densely filled with mitochondria. And I mean, it's not like we have one mitochondrion per cell. We have a ton of, we have billions in some places, mitochondria per cell. And we have, 100,000 more electron transport chains inside each mitochondrion. So we just have, they're so important. If we have a lot of them, they're very, very important.
Yeah.
And so the job of the mitochondria is to tunnel electrons. So they're literally pushing electrons through them, making electricity, making a proton gradient, making water, essentially utilizing light and giving us energy. So I think that in the reproductive system, they're really important, because if you've ever seen, there's this viral video, I'll have to find it for you, maybe you can put it in the show notes, but it's actually showing implantation occurring between the sperm and the egg, and there's actually a beautiful light that's been given off.
Yeah.
And so it's just remarkable. And so light is essentially rooted in life, and life is essentially rooted in light. I think it's it's so beautiful to think about. But yes, women. So we inherit 100% of our mitochondria from our mum. So we don't actually inherit our mitochondria from our dad. Actually, I lied just then. There's a 0.01% chance that you will inherit your father's mitochondria. And so what are mitochondria aren't the same. The mitochondria in me and the mitochondria in you are completely different. I have mitochondria that are optimized for a cold climate.
Yes.
So I'm optimized to live in Europe, where it gets really, really cold. Whereas, I mean, unless your mum is European and your dad is from somewhere near the equator, I'm not too sure. But I think your mum is from where?
Both of my parents are from Sri Lanka.
Oh, perfect. So your mitochondria are probably optimized to live somewhere where it's quite warm, because you have nice tan skin, right?
Yeah.
Now, that means that as a child, I'm optimized to live where my mum's heritage have lived.
Yeah.
Because she's passing on that information to me. And adaptation doesn't happen generation to generation. It takes a long time for our mitochondria to evolve. So maybe in 20 generations, my children, my great-great-grandchildren, whatever it is, they might be a little bit more inclined to live somewhere like Australia, and their mitochondria might have adapted to be here. But in a couple of generations, it just doesn't happen like that. And we truly don't know how long it takes, really. The studies haven't been done. But so we inherit our mitochondria from our mum. So that means that mum has a really important job, because she essentially needs to pass on the healthiest mitochondria to her children. There's actually a really, really cool process where in the women's egg, there's actually several mitochondria, and they go through a process. I think it's during ovulation, I believe, at some point in the cycle, where they actually go through all the mitochondria and they kick out and they kill all the 50% of the most damaged mitochondria. So before implantation. So that's actually how important the mitochondria are, and that we actually give children the healthiest mitochondria. Because if we give children unhealthy mitochondria, that means they're not going to be able to make energy as well. They're not going to tunnel electrons as much. They're not going to have as much electricity, which is not good. The light show at implantation isn't going to be as big as what it should be, right?
Yeah.
And this brings us back to a really interesting conversation, which is about why women seem to be so much sicker than men in society. And I see this all the time, and it makes me so angry because I feel like women are often so gaslit by the medical industry. It's like, oh, you're not feeling well, well, your blood results are fine, so you must be fine. Or, oh, you can't lose weight, you mustn't be sticking to the 1,200 calorie diet that I prescribed you. You must be doing something wrong. But women's bodies are built completely different to men. And part of that reason is that we are in charge of sensing our environment so that we can give that information to our children via our mitochondria. And so the job of the man is really to protect the female so that she can be a little bit less resilient, so that she can feel the environment and that she can give that information onto the offspring. Men, not so much. And something that really determines the sensitivity is a leptin, so white fat. So women naturally have a higher percentage of white fat, and that's what makes us more sensitive to danger, to our environment, and allows us to have this beautiful connection to our children in the way of mitochondria. And yes, I think it's just really fascinating to learn about these things and to understand the things that do make the mitochondria unhealthy and what we can do to actually optimize them.
So if you were to give a woman your 5 top tips for mitochondrial health as she prepares for her fertility, for conception, pregnancy, and postpartum, what were your 5 top tips?
So my first one is to ensure leptin sensitivity. And so that's a really big conversation. I don't know if you want me to get into that and explain that a little bit more.
Yeah, give us the briefest summary that you can manage.
Leptin is a hormone that's secreted from our white fat cells, and each night it docks to our brain. And it's really important that we're able to be sensitive to leptin and receive that signal, because it really does act as it really influences our circadian rhythms and the information that we pass on to our children. And so how we do that is via making sure we have a good circadian rhythm to begin with. And I guess that's where the top 5 tips come in, because that's what I'm trying to do when I'm working with women that are trying to conceive. I'm really trying to work on their leptin sensitivity to begin with. And so that's things like watching the sunrise. That's things like potentially spending more time in the sun. And what that looks like for everyone is a little bit different depending on lots of different things. But I think that getting a good circadian rhythm, it can be quite difficult in today's environment when some women are up late working, we have busy jobs, we're looking after children, we're looking after everyone else, we're trying to exercise and do this and that. But, it all comes down to really looking after your light environment, making sure that you're connected to those natural seasons, those natural cycles, and then blocking the artificial light at nighttime. And so I think there's lots that goes into that. But one, waking up at the same time every day. So making sure that you're watching that sunrise, getting that red light, because the sunrise is really, really dominant in that infrared light, which helps our body make water as well. So girls, if you don't want wrinkles, watch the sunrise. It's better than any other collagen supplement. 2, we want to stay away from bright lights in the morning. So bright lights, they really have an effect on our body. They clip a hormone called ACTH and upregulate cortisol. Now, if we're stressed, whether that be from our job or, looking at really bright lights in the morning, it just makes our body really stressed out. And if we're stressed, our body's not going to make fertility hormones. It's going to say, Kiera's actually really stressed today. Let's actually not make a baby, because if we do make a baby, it's probably not coming into a good environment. Let's actually make more cortisol to keep Kiera safe so that when she's ready, she can have a baby in the future. And so the lighting part is really, really important. You want these beautiful healing frequencies of like warm infrared, like I have candles on right now in my house, and you want to stay away from these really bright lights. And not only at sunrise, but also after sunset too. That's really important. Did you have any questions surrounding the light stuff while we're here?
I just want to add in that I have been doing this over the last 6 months, and I've historically had horrific menstrual cramps. Like I can't stand, like it's been really bad. But my last cycle, nothing, no pain. Like,
Hey.
I was like waiting for it. Like, what is going on? I mean, even last month it was a bit less, and I was like, interesting. And this month there was no pain. So, and that's like not even doing things perfectly. I don't switch the lights on. If it's dark, I'm like kind of going around in the dark. I'll put one candle on. I have my red light lamp if I really need it, which is forcing me to go to bed earlier because it kind of sucks trying to do things in the dark. Which means I'm waking up earlier. I don't get the sunrise. I haven't managed to incorporate that into my routine yet, but I do get outside every day. And previously, there were days where I wouldn't go outside. I would be in my car to clinic to home, and stay indoors. And so now I'm like, every lunchtime, I go out for a half an hour walk. And yeah, just even that as a shift, I expect that you're not a huge fan of supplementation, but I've been taking Shilajit and did a liver and kidney cleanse, these little herbal tinctures. And it's absolutely changed my month because I didn't lose a whole week and then try and catch up on, well, I still rested, but yeah, I would just to say that this stuff works.
Yeah, it's so interesting to think that. Well, I mean, going back to what we originally said, is that God created the natural world perfectly for us. And so it's when we start implementing artificial lights and all of these things that really mess with our circadian rhythm,
Yeah.
Even just the notion, like I remember the first time that I heard your consciousness and your body don't run on the same time. I was like, what? Like, I know that it's 7 o'clock. Obviously, my body knows that it's 7 o'clock. I was like, oh, wait, no. Like, my body doesn't actually know what's going on in my brain. My body actually tells time through the light in my environment. So if it's really bright, my body thinks it's midday. If it's really warm and it's, sunset lights, my body's going to think the sun's setting.
Yeah.
And I was like, wow. And here I am at 10 o'clock at night doing uni assignments under bright blue lighting and then wondering why I turn my laptop off, go to bed, why I can't go to sleep. It's because I'm full of cortisol and my melatonin's being completely shut off. So, and then we have to ask ourselves, why are we prescribing children melatonin all the time when they're, is it their light environment that's causing it? And more often than not, I work with clients and it is the light environment.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's just such simple things, but we've just overlooked them for so long.
Yeah. What would you say to someone who's trying to implement these things but's facing a lot of criticism? For example, I work in clinic, and I wouldn't say criticism, but for about the last 6 months, I'll go in and I'll switch the clinic lights off. I don't need it. We have a massive glass window, the sun's streaming in. I mean, we have screens, obviously, because I have to write my notes, and we have a lamp for the dental chair. The actual lights in the room now really, I find very jarring. I can't, I can feel it in my body that it's really frustrating my body in some way. But it's always the jokes and the comments like, are you sure you can see? It's like, I can see just fine. What would you say for those who are still kind of interacting with the mainstream world and want to share this in a loving way, but are being met with the comments or the little jokes?
Yeah, I mean, all I can say is lead by example.
Yeah.
It's the biggest thing. I mean, it's just seeds, sowing seeds, and then you might say something, and then one day that person might be out at nighttime and they might see someone wearing blur blockers, or they might go online and see some famous person wearing them, and they're like, oh my gosh, maybe that girl at work was right about the light. And then my biggest thing is, if you like being right, now's a great time to talk about it, because in the next few years, this stuff is going to be so mainstream that you're going to really thank your older self for getting in early and talking about these things. Because I mean, I've been talking about it for 3.5 years now, and I never ever thought it would be mainstream. But yet, the doctor that I study under is best friends with RFK, who's now gone on live TV and said seed oils are ruining our health and he's going to fix the chronic illness pandemic. So I'm going to tell you right now that there's massive changes coming in the healthcare industry, and it's not as far away as you think. And so all of this is going to be mainstream very, very soon.
Yeah.
Whether people choose to implement it or not is up to them.
Yeah.
It's not for everybody. You can lead a horse to water and you can't make it drink. But I think that when people get sick of being sick, they try every modality they can. And when they don't get better, sometimes they try crazy, and crazy works. And so I think that's where
Yeah.
we're headed because, we go to our doctors and we get healthcare advice. I don't know. I feel like do you pay for healthcare out of pocket or do you have health insurance over there?
We have a national health service, so it's free.
Oh, perfect. Yeah. So we're like that here in Australia as well, if you can't tell from my voice, unfortunately. So we actually get free healthcare.
Mm.
So we just get given a doctor and we go there and he tells us how to fix our health and we do it. And if it doesn't work,
Mm-hmm.
we don't really care because it was free. So there's really no sense of, I guess, going back to what you said, the podcast was about is sovereignty and agency. And so we're not actually giving out our money to our doctors and saying, hey, can you please heal me? Here's 100 euros.
Mm-hmm.
But it is still being charged to us in the form of healthcare and public pocket and taxes. So we are paying their wages.
Mm-hmm.
And we need to get back into that mindset of if a doctor's telling us to fix our health and they're telling us what we need to do and we're not getting better, then we can fire them and we can go find a better doctor
Yeah.
that actually provides proof of work and they actually do make us better.
Yeah.
And that concept is completely overlooked and no one really understands that you can fire your doctor and you can go find someone who makes you better.
Yeah.
And in my clinical experience, I think that's why I work with a lot of Americans because they're used to paying for healthcare. And so when you're actually paying for it with your own money out of your own pocket, you want to make sure that you're receiving the work right. It's like if we pay a plumber to come and fix our taps and they don't fix them and there's still water going everywhere and it's actually worse than when they got there, we're not going to pay them and say, oh, here's 200 euros. Thank you so much. We're going to say, I'm not paying you until you fix those pipes because that's what I asked you to do.
Yeah.
Healthcare shouldn't be any different. I don't know why we're accepting this standard of care. But yeah, so I think Americans now, they're like, okay, well, I'm going to go and find someone that can help me. And so a lot of them are hiring external people who perhaps don't work in the mainstream system and are using different modalities because when we do look at the mainstream system, what are they really doing? They're just prescribing supplement after pharmaceutical after supplement, and it's not really getting to the root cause of why you actually had that hormonal imbalance in the first place.
Yeah.
I don't know if you resonate with that, but I feel like you would.
Yeah, I do. I do. That makes sense. That makes sense. Yeah, it's really funny because someone that I work with said to me a couple of months ago that her doctor told her not to breastfeed after 6 months because it's not good for the baby. And then she said, it's science. And I was like, what science is this? Like, I was like, and people are so invested in what their doctor said. I don't know if there's even teaching on breast milk and what it does for you and how it responds to the child in medical school. And I'm just going to guess that there isn't. So I mean, I'm just like, I was just jaw to the floor, like, what do you mean? Like, that's not science. Whose science is that? And people are so invested in what their doctor is saying. And I really, really want to invite people to not to kind of discard their doctors or say that they're stupid or anything like that, but to question whether their level of education and whether the education system that we've all been through is geared up and in order to support our optimal expression, because I don't think it is.
Yeah, I think you put that very beautifully. I mean, to put it quite frankly, all the peer-reviewed studies that we use to build the basics, I mean, not the basics, the basis of our textbooks that validify the things that we're taught in medical school and in all of education in the healthcare system, they're all, built upon these peer-reviewed journal articles. And where do they come from? Well, they cost millions of dollars to produce. So who's paying for them?
Yes.
75% of them, 75% of all peer-reviewed journal articles are funded by big pharmaceutical companies. Now, why would big pharmaceutical companies fund this research? Well, to prove that their drugs work so that they can sell them to people, either charged to private pocket or through Medicare or government rebates back into their own industry. When you understand that no one's going to fund a study, well, maybe if the sun had money, the sun would fund some studies to show that it actually is really, really healing, and you actually do need the sun in really good doses for good health. maybe we would, but no one's going to fund that because they can't make money out of it. That's a really bad profit margin, and that's a really bad business decision. As a pharmaceutical company who funds all of the peer-reviewed journal articles that go on to validify all of our textbooks, to go and say, hang on a second, I'm actually going to go and fund natural healthcare remedies and show that grounding actually works, just like heparin, to reduce to be an anticoagulant in people's blood. It just wouldn't. And so you need to start asking questions and be like, okay, that makes so much sense. And funnily enough, I was researching the other day about red light and how it increases fertility and all of these things. And I came across a really recent, beautiful journal article, and I'll share it with you because it's so funny. I got to the end of it and it was concluding that red light was really good for fertility and conception rates. And I thought, wow, who on earth funded this study? And I looked at who funded it, and it was an IVF clinic that wanted to swap out all the blue lights during the conception part of the procedure to red lights because it increased fertility outcomes, so they could increase their service charges. And I thought, you just can't make this up, can you?
Yeah. Do you believe that they know the truth and they're just not telling us? Or do you think that they genuinely believe in what they're putting out there with pharmaceuticals and other kind of band-aid solutions?
Well, it's not even a conspiracy. I mean, it's literally, it's actually so fact, and it's so sad that we just are where we are now. But I mean, now that we know, we can do better. But I think that some people know, I think the whole blue light thing actually started with the mafia when they decided to make their gambling machines blue light lit so that people could get addicted to them. And I think Apple found that out, and then Apple decided to make their products the same, because if you want to make a good product, then you make it addictive. So I think they definitely understand, and I think that there are people that understand, and they're usually people who make products. But I think that I don't think the pharmaceutical reps, I don't think the doctors, I don't think they really do understand. And as a doctor, I think it's quite frustrating because you spend all these years studying and you think you're going to help people, but then you get to where you're going and you've invested all this time and you've invested all this money and you've been through almost like an army camp, like the medical training, the overnight, the free labor, that you really, when you've put a lot of effort and energy into something like a relationship, even, you don't want it to end, and you're willing to put in a lot of work to support that. I think that's the same as a doctor. You're willing to fight tooth and nail for your stance because you put so much effort in, so of course it's right, but maybe it's not right. And it's also very frustrating because the general population, especially people who are sick, they don't really want to put in effort to change. They want to make good dietary choices, and that's not a doctor's job. The doctor isn't your health coach. The doctor isn't there to coach you and give you support and love you and guide you like a mother is. That's something you have to do on your own, or you have to find support elsewhere through family or a coach or something like this. But that's fundamentally not a doctor's role. They're there to treat chronic disease. And so when it comes to preventative medicine, like, they don't understand. They weren't trained in that at all. That's a new occupation that's totally come out in the last 5 years. So we need to go back to understanding the doctor's not someone you go to for preventative healthcare. That's there when you're really sick and you don't want to, you've exhausted all remedies and you need something to help you get through life. And that's what they are. They're a prescription pad for pharmaceuticals. They're not there for preventative measures. And I think we're just starting to realize that.
Yeah.
And they have quotas to meet. They have bosses, they have things to do, and they only have 5 minutes with you.
Yeah.
And as a coach myself, the amount of effort you have to put into people to really care for them, to push them forward, to really educate them, and in a way that they can understand, really coming to their level, it's very exhausting. I can only take a few calls a day. Whereas a doctor, they might see 50 patients over the span of 2 days. I mean, they are exhausted. They just want to go home to their children and family.
Yeah. That's the truth of it. Like, and with the best intentions, that's all they're able to give. I'd like to touch back to something you mentioned earlier, that the role of the woman is to, nurture, cultivate this child inside of her. She houses life and delivers it. And therefore she's more attuned to her environment and therefore more sensitive and therefore more prone to get sick, right? Because of the density of the mitochondria that we also, that is also within us. And you mentioned that the role of the man then is to protect us, to enable us to cultivate our mitochondrial health and to protect us during pregnancy, childbirth, and child rearing. Given that we don't live in a world where any of us are in the optimal light environment, are in the optimal kind of flow of how we're designed to live, and going out hunting, bringing home local seasonal food, eating good quality meat. We've got men who may be highly successful in terms of material success. So earning really great money, buying the cars, buying the houses, etc. And at the same time, that comes with working long hours, being under artificial light, etc. And then maybe not being able to translate that career and business success into relational success. So knowing how to be a safe space emotionally for her, knowing how to protect her. Do you think those things are linked? And if so, how?
Yeah, that's a really good question. This is like one of my favorite topics. This is a fun podcast. Yeah, I think it's really interesting. This is where I think, I'm just going to say, this is where I think a relationship with God is really, really important, because those value sets and those moralities and really holding yourself accountable and holding yourself to a standard and wanting to be better actively, I think is really instilled through religion. And I think that religion definitely got a lot of things wrong too, especially in modern society. But I think that component is really important. And for anyone who's not religious, that doesn't have to be religion. You don't have to put your hand up and say, I'm Christian or I'm Muslim. But I think that even sitting down and saying, okay, I want my family to have these morals and these standards and these values, and then really teaching that to your children is really important. You know, when my mum was a child, she went and applied for a job, and they gave her that job without an interview because they knew who her parents were, and they knew they were honest, and they knew that they were hardworking. And so that's the kind of thing that we come from, where we knew that what families in the town were really strong and honest and reputable, and we knew which ones weren't. Now today that's completely different because there's such a disconnect. But to get back to your question, I think that, yeah, it is really linked, because the light completely changes our hormones, the fragrances that we're around, artificial fragrances, it changes who we're attracted to. Our health of our menstrual cycles, the health of our hormones, all of these can influence what men we find attractive. I mean, when I was younger, I thought there would be nothing better than dating a man who has a big successful business and a fast car and has his finances in order. And because that's what I was taught as a child, that's what I saw on TV, and so that's what I grew up to value. Now I see those people and I think, oh my gosh, and I'm running the other way. But yeah, it's definitely the light, right? If we fundamentally, what the light is doing as well is it's diminishing our body's ability to make its own dopamine. And so what we get pleasure in completely changes. Staring at screens all day does that to you. Having a poor circadian rhythm does that to you. We no longer get dopamine from providing for our family. You know, the dopamine we're exposed to today is so high. It's so addictive through all different modalities, whether it be television shows or promotions or money or cars or houses. It's just completely changed the way our mentality works. And I think returning back to nature really, really reverses that and allows you to come back to what God put in our hearts in the way that He wanted the family unit to be. I really know a lot of men now. I actually grew up not having a very good picture of men, and I've seen some really horrible relationships and some very nasty things, and I think that impacted me. And then now, being in this world that I'm in of health, I have met more beautiful men in the last year than I have in my entire life, and it really gives me so much hope. And if I'm looking back from a practical perspective, all the men that I know now, yes, they have their own businesses. Yes, they have their lives together, or whatever you want to say, but they're all connected to nature. They're all out in the sun. They're all watching the sunrise. They're all prioritizing their physical health. And yes, they might not be quote unquote financially successful as these other people, but they have time freedom. And so I think that's what you have to ask yourself is, what actually is success? What is that? Is it enough? Is it just more than enough that if someone's out, I can help them? I can provide food for my neighbor. I have sovereignty over my own food and where it comes from. That's successful. Having time to spend with your children, that's successful. Having enough energy and being healthy enough that your libido is so high that you can make love to your wife, like, that's successful. And I don't think that working long hours, having all of these material assets, is successful if you don't have health and you don't have a happy family and you don't have time freedom. I don't think that's really successful. That's the successful we've been taught, but that's not success.
Yeah, I agree.
Anyways, that's a bit of a long answer, but I hope that that made sense.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. And I do feel that um no matter how much material success and flash and all the things, are available to you through your kind of hard work, like the long hours and the climbing the ladder and making the right connections and all of those things, I don't think that can be good for you long term, because that is taking you away from the most important relationship you'll ever have with God, the creator, whoever or however you wish to describe that relationship, and also with the person you choose to spend your life with. Like that only builds resentment if you're not there. That only builds resentment if you're not able to hold her in her time of need, right? Yeah, rich to me is wake up together, eat together, look at the sun together, be in nature together, right? And I believe that when we express our biology and then we tune in with frequency to the level of abundance that we desire, the opportunities will come and that will be possible. I don't think it's one or the other. I think you can have both, just maybe the extremity of it where that wealth is almost reaching sickening levels where it's just about the things. I think if you're feeling like you're doing that and you're on that path and you're completely disconnected from your woman, or you're not able to connect with your family or your kids or your health, God, creation, universe is speaking to you and it's saying, like, yes, you've now tasted the material world. Now integrate that with the natural world and your essence and your spirit, and then see what kind of wealth comes from there. That's what I would say.
Yeah, that's so beautiful. And I think that I want to say that men as well, they were just taught that material assets is what success is. So again, it's just
Yeah.
we're all a victim to our environment,
Yeah.
or maybe not. Maybe our environment's actually teaching us and it's exactly what we need to evolve as mankind. But I'm so sick of this men versus women
Yeah.
2020 argument. I'm just like, there's so much more going on in the world that we need to be aware of. And
Yeah.
it was really hard for me for a long time too. I was like, oh, I'm too masculine. I'm doing my work in health and all of these things.
Yeah.
But I realized that we're all different. We all have a different way to express ourselves. And the most important thing is that you live in tune with who you are and that you're happy with yourself and that you have a connection with God that you're happy with.
Mm.
And yeah, I mean, I used to think that wealth and assets was something I had to focus on, I had to work hard for.
Mm.
But when I started following my faith and doing what I was passionate about,
Mm.
everything just flows so easily as well. So if you find yourself at crossroads constantly and working against the grain, you're probably not in flow with your highest self or your highest purpose. And that maybe that's a sign that something should change, because life's not designed to be hard. Life's designed to be the path of least resistance. And when we give up control, we kind of naturally oscillate into where we're meant to be.
Yeah. Yeah, it's something I was thinking about that, in the whole law of attraction space. It's all about manifest your desires and attract your desires. And I wonder if we can switch that around and say, allow your desires to manifest you. Like if you have a vision, God knows what that vision is. He put it inside of you, or she, or it, or whatever. Put that vision inside of you. And there is a certain expression that you need to embody in order to be able to hold that. Because you can chase the money and the cars and the houses, but it's going to feel hard. Whereas if you say, who do I need to be in order to hold a level of abundance that allows me to be the best version of myself, then those two things are calibrating to each other. And yeah, so the environment and life is teaching us if we're willing to listen.
Oh, I love that so much. I was having this conversation with my friend Michaela. We were talking about the New Age spirituality movement and how it's about deciding what you want and then manifesting that through whatever you decide, visualization or whatever it is. And we think that's so forced and it's such a disconnection from God. And that's actually not faith, because who are we to know exactly what's going to make us happy? Like I thought that nursing would make me happy. I thought that having this car would make me happy, and that wasn't what made me happy. And so us as people, and this is more of a religious standpoint, so just
Yeah.
excuse me, but us as people, we have such a narrow view. We can only see what's right in front of us, and we're faltered by that. But God has a bird's eye view, and He knows exactly what will make us most fulfilled. And so instead of saying, I want this, I want that to make me fulfilled, it's, please, God, give me whatever is going to fulfill me most and what allows me to live in alignment with my purpose. I think that is how it should be.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, and I love this conversation because aside from my dental work, I'm also a spiritual guide and coach. And you know, as soon as we get into the manifesting thing, I'm like, okay, who do you need to be? It's not about the thing. It was never about the thing. It's just a version of you that you've forgotten, that is capable of holding that desire. And the desire is the byproduct. Let it come. But who do you need to be, and who is life asking you to be? And let's walk that path and just use the desire as like a kind of like a target, just because we're humans and we need something to work towards. But don't let it be about that, because then you get consumed by the next thing and the next thing and the next thing, and it will never end. It'll never get done. I think that like moves me into, and I have a few questions. I don't want to keep you here all night, but I want to like just get a few things in. It's the financial part of this, because this path can be expensive. Like I recently, or in the last few years, have gone down to 3 days a week in clinic. And obviously that takes that, you take a hit financially. And then some of these things, whether it's supplements, if you're into supplements, like good quality ones, not ones that you just buy in the shops, or you know, the panels, the red light panels, the lamps, etc. How do you find that balance? And in terms of like directing people to get into nature, which takes time, versus keep working and having the finances to actually be able to afford all the things?
Yeah, of course. Great question. Firstly, I just want to say that nature is accessible and you can do a lot without purchasing a product. It might just take you a little bit longer.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, with every new industry, there's a lot of new products, right? So the quantum health industry, everyone's like red light panel, methylene blue, this and that, but not a lot of people know how to use them properly. It's kind of like these practitioners that will order you a Dutch test, but they won't know how to read them. So it's one, knowing that you can get everything from nature and asking yourself how you can access that for free, because there's actually no cheat code. Like everything's going to have a negative side effect. A red light panel has a negative side effect. And I'm really big on informed consent. And so my clients, I tell them like this red light panel, it's not the end game. Like the end game is you need to move or you need to have financial freedom. And so they understand that it's a positive for them because of their environment, but it's not the best thing. And that's important. But yeah, I mean, it's so hard. When I first started, I obviously left nursing, and then in Australia it was illegal for me to even have a job. So I didn't even have a job for a long time, and I was just studying what I'm talking about now. And so I actually got a job on the weekends. So I was working Friday, Saturday, Sundays, and then I was studying through the week. And so I understand that finances can play a massive role, especially for people who are quite sick too, because they can't work and they're trying to heal. Maybe they are African and they live in UK, and so they need sun. But how are they going to get sun when they can't even afford to pay their rent in 2 weeks? So, I mean, it's blocks to healing, really, isn't it? And it's quite upsetting. And Dr. Jalal and I are working on something to actually help people in those situations, which is a non-for-profit organization, which, funny we're having this conversation because I was working on it today, but all in alignment, right?
Yeah.
But it's frustrating. And so you just have to do different things. Like, for example, if you can't get sun, maybe getting cold is your option. Maybe you have a lake near you and you can get cold and that's what you can do. Or maybe you have to spend more time in the sun. It's just hard, honestly. Knowing what products to invest into. Like a red light panel might not be the best thing for you. Maybe you have to buy a water filter instead, depending on what illness you have. But my best advice would just be try as much as you can to use what's free to you, and then look at how you can access other things. I have clients that have shared red light panels between their family, and so everyone has it on a different week, which is funny in the UK, but there's a lot you can do for free. It might just take you a little bit longer. You don't actually need products. You can source things very cheaply, especially if your practitioner has your best interest at heart. They should always be having that conversation with you. And there's so much information for free too. I think I put up on my Instagram the other day, I was like, yeah, this is our course, but if you don't want to buy a course, literally go onto all the people that I follow on Instagram, go onto all their pages, follow them, and start writing down all their Instagram captions, start a Word document, start writing a title, red light, write down everyone's Instagram captions about red light. Like there's so much you can do for free. You just have to have that sovereignty and that agency to do it and to learn for yourself. But yeah, the products thing is something that I'm really angry about because people are hurting themselves too because they don't understand how to use them, which is upsetting.
Yeah. Vitamin D. In my conversation with Dr. Jalal, he kind of mentioned that he isn't a fan of vitamin D supplementation. Do you agree, and why? Because I've recently went to a conference and we had a whole talk on why we should be vitamin D supplementing after testing, and I'm confused, I'll be honest. So if I'm confused, I'm sure there are many people that are confused. So do you have any insight on this?
Yeah, I do. Firstly, yeah, I'm not a fan of vitamin D supplements. I think that the way that we make vitamin D, how many people do you get that are low in vitamin D and high in cholesterol? So many. And that's because that's a pattern. And so if we are supplementing vitamin D, one, our cholesterol is going to be higher, our LDL cholesterol is going to be higher, and two, our body has pathways that it wants to utilize. How do we make vitamin D? We actually sulfate cholesterol to make vitamin D. And so that's a pathway that needs to be used. When we supplement vitamin D, I don't think there's any data that actually shows that it binds to a receptor. And if it does, it's very, very little. So while it might be high in the serum, it's actually not doing anything for you, which is interesting because everything actually works. We believe that it's not about lock and key mechanism that we're taught. Like vitamin D is just floating around until it bumps into a receptor, and that's how it works. We believe that everything's through oscillation. So that molecule, when we make vitamin D through the sun, it's oscillating at a certain frequency, right? It's kind of like how photosynthesis in plants, why is it so successful? Why does it have such a high solar yield and efficiency? It's almost 100% of the sunlight that hits that plant can be utilized to make energy. And it's because as soon as that light hits that chloroplast, it actually creates an oscillation that attracts the photons into that reaction center. And that's how we work too. When things happen inside of us, it oscillates and it tells other things where to go. We don't believe it's a lock and key mechanism. So one, it might be higher in your body, but it's not actually doing anything. Two, when we take a supplement, we're taking one form of vitamin D that can actually also be extremely disruptive. When we make vitamin D naturally, it acts as a steroid. So there is like hundreds of metabolites that it can become. It's literally, I'm not a steroid, sorry, like a stem cell. It can literally become whatever your body needs it to be. And that can change depending on if you're you right now in the UK or you're you in India or you're you in Mexico. It'll be completely different what your body needs. And so it's about giving your body the right ingredients and then allowing your body to make that decision for you. Again, like we're not here to tell God what to do, our body what to do. We're just here saying, okay, I'm here, I'm ready to do the work. And then just allowing everything to play out the way that it's meant to. And so no, I'm not a big fan of vitamin D supplements. After you take vitamin D for so long, it can actually stop you from making vitamin D naturally as well, which is not good.
Yeah.
And then also, doctors are so behind in the studies that they don't realize that in winter, melatonin actually takes over and does the role of vitamin D. So if it's winter time, you don't really need to supplement vitamin D if you're maximizing your summer, you're storing the vitamin D, and then you're also looking after your melatonin. And how do we do that? We get outside, we block artificial light at nighttime, then melatonin does the right job that it's meant to do. So I think that all these are like just quick fixes, and our body is so much more complex than we know it is.
Yeah. Yeah. That's incredible. Methylene blue, I've seen you post, and I'm like, what is this doing? Tell me more.
Yeah, I think methylene blue is great. It's like a fully synthetic compound. It's used as a dye in the medical industry. It's also been used to clean fish tanks because it's antibacterial, antiparasitic. We use it in my house. If any of my younger siblings get a urinary tract infection, they take it. It completely removes it. It's really great. It can be used for many things. It also can be used really poorly if you don't understand what it's doing. but basically it's an electron donor. So it'll put electrons where it needs to go inside the body, which is very cool. It also does some cool things with iron. So I always get this wrong, but it transfers, I think it's ferrous back to ferric iron, so it can move around the body properly, which is nice. Another thing it does is it allows us to cool our semiconductors in our body, which we're not going to get into, but it's pretty cool, quantum thing. Yeah, I love it. I think it's really good. It reverses hypoxia as well. So I know a lot of men who take it in the sports industry, if they're going to go climb a mountain, their mitochondria will start adapting to that elevation. But if they're just going to run back down again, they might take some methylene blue to kind of reverse that temporarily. Yeah, it does lots of cool things. I think it's just important if you're going to take it, maybe send a message to a practitioner or something on Instagram and just double check that it's for you, because it can actually go wrong too and actually have a negative impact, just like anything really.
Just like all of the things that we've mentioned.
Mhm.
Beautiful. So in summary, like so much of this is available to us naturally through nature. There are tools that we can get. We can get red light panels or little red light lamps for nighttime. We can use candles. We can use grounding sheets or, all of these tools. But these are almost ways that we can transition or support our transition into doing it more naturally. For example, if we need to cut down our working hours or create a business stream that allows us to have time and financial freedom, etc. I do this thing at the end of each chat. I borrowed it from the Diary of the CEO, so Stephen Bartlett, where he asks each guest a question left by the previous guest. So there is a question for you, and it's been left by Dr. Tasha Terzo, who is the founder of the ALF approach. And she's a doctor, a homeopath, an osteopath. She has so many things to her name. So the question is, I'm going to make sure I get it right. What would you say is a unifying force for all human beings? So her explanation was, where can we always come together and say, yep, I gotcha, rather than all the division that there is around?
Oh, that's a very open-ended question, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah. And you can interpret it how you please.
Yeah. I mean, we're a place that we can all come together. I think that nature really is the place that we can all come together. It's healing. It treats everyone the same. It's completely decentralized. No matter your race, no matter your religion, no matter what you've done now or in the past, it's going to treat you the exact same. And I think that's really hard to come by in today's society when we're all so conscious. Nature isn't. It just gives what it gives, and that's it. So the healing is accessible for everyone. And I think we can all unify around the fact that chronic disease is at an epidemic, and we need to return back to nature for our children, not only for us, but for healthier generations.
Beautiful. That's a really great answer. And what would you leave as a question for the next person? You can take a moment just to think about it.
Okay. Okay, my question is, what's your prayer for the next generation?
Oh, I love it. I love it so much. That's great. Thank you so much for coming on and chatting with me. I've been really excited. I think I usually don't write stuff down, but today I was like, I need to write stuff down or I'm going to get flustered. It's just been so nice talking to you. I actually want you to maybe plug the Quantum Health Academy just before we go. Any information about that? I understand it's starting in February next year, which is good because people have time to sort themselves out. Just give us a couple of sentences on what that course is going to be about and what opportunities that will give anyone who wants to study it.
Yeah, of course. Well, thank you so much for having me on. It's been really nice. Usually the chats that I'm on are really, really centered around deep science. And so it's been really nice to explore different concepts and relationships and women's health and things. It's been great. I'd love to look at your work too more. So around the work that you do, I think it's interesting. But yeah, thank you. The Quantum Health Academy, it's a group non-for-profit by myself, Dr. Dalal Khan and Cameron Borg. So we realize that this information can be quite esoteric and people don't really want to know about it. But when you go looking, there's actually a lot of data and a lot of peer-reviewed research that's out there that supports this. And so we've created a course for doctors and medical professionals to actually take so they can understand more about how the seasons and temperature impacts the mitochondria and changes our metabolism, and how a lack of red light can actually influence things like Alzheimer's and dementia, and dehydration actually stems from mitochondria, not really the water that we're drinking. And so these all seem like simple things, but they're actually quite complex. And to really break down the science in a way that's understandable and presented with data, I think is really, really needed, because it takes on average 15 years for new data to make it into the textbooks. And I just don't really think we have 10 years. I think that we need to really be a bottoms up movement and push this to the medical industry ourselves. And so it's really exciting. We've had some universities reach out to accredit the course. And so we're in the process of doing that, which is exciting. I never thought that would happen. But yeah, so we're starting teaching in February next year. It's a 10-month curriculum. And if you'd like more information, you can go to quantumhealthacademy.org and everything's on there.
Amazing, amazing, amazing. Thank you so much. Yeah, let's just stay in touch. I love the sound of the course. I was on the kind of intro call, so I was like, I need to have a look at this website and get myself sorted. So thank you, thank you, thank you for your time. I hope you have a beautiful night, and we will speak soon.
Not a problem. Bye.